Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
George Bottomley, it's great to have you here as a guest.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yes, and George is a friend and has a great life experience. I'll jump into your bio a little bit here first. I love this. A strategist grounded in veterinary and physician associate education.
My LinkedIn tagline.
That is a great tagline.
I was wondering where you found that stuff.
Yes, yeah. And so also, I'm going to jump right to, as far as currently, your most recent activity, you are a higher education innovator. I love that too.
Well, yes.
That's you.
I guess the last 10 years or so of my career, I returned to Rhode Island, my native state. Where was I before that? I was in Maine, actually.
Before that, you were at the University of New England.
University of New England,
Physician assistant program director.
Director of the PA program.
Yeah.
And I'd been wanting to start a PA program in Rhode Island. That's kind of what I did over the years, the second half of my life career. Either started new PA physician assistant programs or took already existing PA programs out of some accreditation difficulty or some faculty challenges or union challenges at one place. And I'd always wanted to start the first program in Rhode Island because it was one of the only states left that didn't have a PA program. And I got a call from Johnson & Wales University. The provost had a good background in health sciences, and I'd known him before. And they asked me if I'd come and start the program. And
Start from scratch.
With some other opportunities, build the PA program. And then if it met with success, because Johnson & Wales was stepping out of their paradigm, out of their culinary and business background and into the healthcare world, health professions world. So started the PA program, got it up and running, reconstructed a whole new building in downtown Providence in the Jewelry District, accepted our first class. Everybody passed the national boards first time around. So we met with some great success, created some great relationships with the healthcare systems down there. And it was off and running, and started other graduate level health professions programs and then some undergraduate programs, enough to create a college of health and wellness, which was kind of a long-term plan.
Within Johnson & Wales?
Yeah. And then I became the inaugural dean of the College of Health and Wellness.
Wow.
So yeah, we started that. I guess that's the innovator, I guess.
Yeah.
We brought Johnson & Wales from the food and culinary area into the food as medicine area. That was the way we made that happen. Back in the day when food was really just starting to become recognized as something on a grander scale, that really what food was medicine, and you are what you eat and all that stuff anyway. So
Awesome. So I'll come back to your other things in your bio, but what's it like to take a group of university level folks and introduce a new program that's completely foreign to them? These are people who kind of, am I correct that they run a certain path and they're on that highway, and you all of a sudden got them exiting off a major freeway?
Yeah. Well, I had a good track record. I'd done well in the past at different programs that I'd been at. The provost who hired me kind of knew who I was from my background. And I remember when I interviewed, other people who I'd interviewed said, "Oh, this will be no problem. We can do this, we can do that. We've done this before." And I think I was the only person who was really honest about the challenges that we're going to be faced with in a brand new program, new state, finding clinical sites, attracting really good students into a program that has no track record of growing students and having them pass national board. So I think they trusted me. I know they trusted me. We hit it off with each other. There was an incredible guy, Tom Dwyer, was the provost at the time, we had similar he was from Newport, Rhode Island, where I was from. I was from Newport. We had mutual friends, so that we built a bit of a bond, and they trusted me, and gave me the raw materials that I needed to build a really strong program. Gave me the money and the ability to pick and choose what I wanted to do, and it worked.
Wow,
it worked.
That is amazing.
It was nice to have their trust. Yeah.
And the trust came because you had been at the University of New England. You had been the inaugural physician assistant program director at
Salus University. Started that program from scratch. 100% pass rate on the first board go round. Wow. So I'd done it before.
Yeah. And physician assistant program director at the Central Michigan University.
CMU, yeah.
CMU, and then physician associate program director at Yale University School of Medicine.
Yeah, interim director for a while. I was at Yale, I'd say 1994 or so. I was doing a postdoc at Kansas State and was thinking about maybe I didn't want to do research the rest of my life and sequence genes and all that stuff. And was thinking about going to medical school because I missed medicine and I wanted to try. I wanted not try, but I thought human medicine would be an interesting area to go. And I love to learn. I like to learn new stuff, and I loved medicine. Thought about going back to the University of Chicago, where I'd done a residency years before. Good school. I still knew some people there. And then a friend of mine who was on a triathlon team in Rhode Island that I knew, because I was doing heavy into triathlons in those days, said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a PA?" And what's a PA? I had no idea. It was 1993 or 4 or something like that.
Public announcer, right? That's a PA?
A PA, yeah, public assistant. So looked into it, and actually went home from Kansas, where I was doing that postdoc, to Rhode Island for some reason, see my parents, I guess. And dialed up the PA program at Yale. I mean, why not? And went down to spend an afternoon with Elaine Grant, who was the program director at the time, and we hit it off. And she encouraged me to apply to their program, and I got in. I was shocked. And so I was a Yale student and graduated Yale, and I was a National Health Service Corps scholar, which is it's for physicians and nurses and NPAs. They will pay your way through school if you give them 2 years, in my case, 2 years of service to an underserved community after graduation, which is what I wanted to do anyway. I wanted to work with the underserved. So got a free ticket to Yale, and spent 2 years after graduation at the Hill Health Center in New Haven, Connecticut, for a while, and then they sent me out on my own into Ansonia to start my own satellite clinic.
Ansonia, where is it?
Ansonia, Connecticut.
Okay.
It's in the valley, in west of New Haven. Fascinating couple of years working with a challenging population.
What were some of your memorable takeaways?
I think the most interesting cases were we took care of a lot of people in the valley that had dual diagnoses or multiple diagnoses. They had mental health challenges, but they also had physical challenges or medical challenges. They'd have schizophrenia, but they'd also have diabetes. They'd have obsessive compulsive disorder, but they'd also have diabetes again, for example. So patients who would have an obsessive compulsion to stick themselves and check their blood glucose all the time, dozens and dozens and dozens of times a day because of their OCD disorder. trying to keep them regulated with it was a fascinating experience working with the patients and their social workers, in trying to keep their mental and physical well-being on a long-term basis.
Challenge.
Very challenging. Yeah.
And you'd see these patients often?
Yes, that was pretty much. I started with 0 patients on my panel there, and the great thing was that over the 2 years that I was there, we slowly built the patient population and the size of the clinic. So I was able to actually spend a lot of time with patients in their initial visits and follow-up visits, and get their confidence I was a new learner, a new practitioner myself in human medicine. I'd been a veterinarian for a long time before that, but it allowed me to grow slowly as a provider while I took care of my patients.
So how old were you when you became a PA?
46.
46. And prior to that, you were in the veterinary?
Prior to that, I went to vet school, graduated from Michigan State in 1976, so 20 years before. Practiced for mixed animal, horses, cattle, dogs and cats, whatever, for a couple of years, and missed school. I missed being in school. So decided to go back and do residencies. I first started with a physiology residency at the University of Minnesota, discovered that physiology was not what I really wanted to do, but rather abnormal physiology, which is pathology. Mm-hmm. So left there and went to do that comparative medicine and pathology residency at the University of Chicago. It was a wonderful place to study, a wonderful place to live.
So, and we're in the vet world at Chicago, correct?
Yep, University of Chicago, comparative medicine, pathology. Okay. I did a little bit of human medicine in the medical school, where I got to know people in the medical school, but I also did research and worked with in their animal care facility, in their research facility. Did research in cardiovascular medicine, was just stumbled into one of the 2 best centers of atherosclerosis research in the country at the time. One was there was Goldstein and Brown, I think it was, if my memory serves me well, in Seattle. And we were the Whistler group at the University of Chicago, and we were all,
innovative,
friendly, collaborating in a collaborative relationship, but in a very competitive relationship about who would discover what, first in those areas. And it was a wonderful, wonderful couple of years working with Dr. Whistler and his team as a veterinarian on a team of veterinarians and physicians. It just was. He was a Quaker. He had Quaker meetings. His leadership style was very Quaker-ish. Big room. Everybody was in it. The lab techs, vets, physicians, everybody, animal care people. It was a fascinating place to be for a couple of years.
Did that experience from him and being there influence you in your later work in your PA programs?
I think his collaborative spirit. I think I do best in an area, in a world where there's collaboration and sharing, and where you learn through collaboration, as opposed to I subsequently went on later to do a residency at Cornell in strictly veterinary pathology, and the education style there bordered more on learning through intimidation than anything else. Did not flourish. I did okay, but it was a tough environment to be in, but learned a lot of pathology. And I think over the years, I think when I had more leadership positions of my own, it was definitely trying to lead by consensus and much more collaborative, friendly, because I'd been browbeaten enough in my past to know that you get more with honey than vinegar.
Yeah.
To a point, and then you got to make a decision. Sometimes it's a hard decision,
but you can make a decision with honey.
You can.
And still make it sweet.
You can.
Yeah.
You can.
Everybody may not like as much honey as you give, or
yeah.
It may taste like vinegar to some.
I may have been a little bit too collaborative at times, and maybe spent a little too much time occasionally trying to get consensus. But shoulda, woulda, coulda.
You had great success, George.
I did okay.
Yeah,
I did okay.
So clearly, hearing all that. You have a love for teaching and healing people and animals.
Yeah, I think I do. I don't like to see people in pain. And I'd like to be able to help and fix things. I think I like to fix things. I think I like to make things better. And I like to grow things and provide environments where things can grow optimally. And
in the beginning, it was animals.
Yes.
And I'm sure people as well, but animals was your focus in your veterinary work. When did you discover that animals were something that were a passion of yours?
Well, I have to thank my grandmother, actually. Let's see, where can I start? Grew up in Newport, Rhode Island, beautiful town. Oh my God, just incredible architecture, landscape architecture, just a fabulous place to live. And I think somewhere along the line, and we've talked about this, and it's one reason that I'm involved in the Mid-Coast Youth Center today, and at the Y today. I'm on the board of directors of the YMCA, is because of the challenges that I faced as an adolescent and a teenager with my father. He and my mother met and had two boys, and neither of them went to college, high school graduates. My father was a sailor, and then subsequently got a job on the Navy base as a blue-collar worker. My mother also worked on the Navy base as a secretary receptionist, and had two boys. So I have a little brother 7 years younger than me. And I think when I got to be a teenager and they had two boys, I think that they started to struggle with balancing, because they both worked full time. Then they started to struggle with the challenges of having two boys working full time and providing for a family the way they thought it needed to be provided for. I was born in 1950, so in the mid-60s. We moved back into the house that my mother was born in Newport, so it became this extended family. My grandmother, I remember, at a much earlier than when I was a teenager, she had quit her job to be able to take care of my brother and I. So it was an interesting household. We lived on the second floor, four of us. My grandmother and grandfather lived on the first floor. And I think my father started to struggle with the reality of having two boys and providing them with what he thought was necessary. And he started to drink, cracked. He just cracked. And it all worked out well in the end, in my 40s again. But I think in those teenage years, my grandmother recognized that I needed something to occupy my time in a substantive way. And she introduced me to horses. My cousin had a horse in Newport. She took me to horse shows in New Jersey, Branchville, Sussex County Farm and Horse Show, because her sister's son was connected to the horse world down there. So she brought me down there and introduced me to that. And it just really stuck. So I started to spend more and more time away from the house as a stable boy and a groom at some very nice stables in Newport. Learned how to shoe horses, braid manes and tails for horse shows. It took me over. I spent less and less time at home, and I think everything worked out well. If you took me out of the mix, the family mix, I think the family functioned a lot better.
The horse farms or stables that you would work at, look close by. How would you get there?
They were all on the island.
Okay.
Before I could drive, I would take a bus out to Sandy Point Avenue and walk down Sandy Point Avenue to take care of the horses at this one stable. It was a beautiful, incredible stable. And then I would ride my bike. I became a member of the 4-H club at one of the stables where I worked. And the head of the leader of the 4-H group there knew that the Hammersmith Farm was looking for a stable boy. And I was 14 or 15, I think. And that was an incredible opportunity for me. That's the farm that was owned by Lee Bouvier, who is Jacqueline Kennedy's mother. So I became, when Mrs. Kennedy and the kids would come up in the summer from, I guess, DC, I was honored to meet her and the kids and become part of that interesting world for my teenage years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just an interesting time growing up in Newport. So yeah, I found a life outside of my house where I could find respect and get positive feedback from adults because of my hard work. And it didn't dawn on me at the time that, hard work is rewarded and I got to work hard. But it just, years later, I realized that, that's kind of maybe where I got my work ethic. And worked hard and did well in those circumstances. Didn't study at all in high school, never took a book home. Bought a motorcycle the day I turned 16, so it was very difficult to take books home. And I hated school. I was fat. I was a fat kid, just all the pathologies, we can get into the pathology. Fat kid, bullied in high school by students and occasional teachers alike. But I could escape to the stable and that world and find that my hard work was rewarded and honored, and financially, I made money and was able to be much more independent, I think.
Were you a student that could get good grades without studying, or how did that work?
I did okay.
Because ultimately, George, you ended up at Yale, so
I know
you don't stumble your way in there.
I did not study. I did what I had to. I remember getting low numbers for effort. 3s. I was a well-behaved, 1 in conduct and 3s in effort, and would be getting the occasional A. I can't remember what I got A's in, B's and C's. I was not a stellar student. Somehow got into the University of Rhode Island as an undergraduate, and remember walking up the hill to the library in my freshman year with a bunch of books and said, I guess I need to learn how to study if I want to be a veterinarian, because by that point I had realized that that's kind of what I wanted to do. So I did. I did well in undergraduate school, and got scholarships, which were very helpful, and did well in undergraduate school. Waited on table, worked my way through undergraduate school. got into vet school and started the pathology residencies and so forth.
Do you think your teachers in high school, your effort, your ranking as an effort, were them recognizing that you had a lot more?
Yes. Yeah, I heard that a lot. I heard that a lot. I just didn't want to do it. Yeah. I just really I just got so much grief from students. I mean, I had nicknames, and even one of the, I just wanted to get out of there every day. I remember I didn't even stick around for graduation. I remember I got a job at a stable in North Carolina, in Hendersonville, North Carolina. I found it in a magazine, in a horse magazine, and I applied for it, and I got it. And as soon as I could leave high school, I got on a plane and headed to Hickory, North Carolina. Yeah, and the people in Hickory were in charge of the summer camp in Hendersonville, and we hit it off, and it was a wonderful summer there.
You're 18 at this time? Maybe?
Yeah, I guess I was around 18.
17, 18, 19 maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So the summer between my senior year of high school and first year of college, I was in Hendersonville. And then the second year, they hired me back to lead the camp, to take care of the camp at another camp in Brevard. Beautiful town, Brevard, North Carolina.
What were you doing? What were your duties at the camp? You're just out of high school. What are you doing?
I do everything. Muck out stalls, feed hay, water the horses, brush the horses, saddle the horses up, give riding lessons, because by that point, I could teach beginner classes easily. Lead trail rides in the mountains. Really, I do just about anything that it came to when it came to taking care of horses.
A dream job.
It was nice. It was very nice. It was very nice. That first summer at Hendersonville was interesting. It was Camp Blue Star, led by the Pumpkins. I've actually been back there since. A couple of years ago, I drove in the driveway when I was down there visiting a friend of mine. They offered me the opportunity that first year at Camp Blue Star to go down a week or two early, because they had a special camp before the paying kids came. There was a 2-week camp that they gave camperships to for kids from inner city Atlanta. And, suddenly Martin Luther King's twin boys were in the cabin that me and this other guy were the camp, the cabin leaders of. Really? Okay. It's just a cosmic things that have serendipitously landed in my lap over the years that I look back on, even more recent. That it just astound me.
The dots, all those dots that just connect.
Yeah, the people whose paths I've. Anyway.
So you mentioned the boys, the Martin Luther King's twin boys being there. What was their? What were they like? Did they know who they were or who they were going to become? Maybe?
They were just regular kids. Yeah. They didn't stand out. I just knew who they were, and
This is in what year, George?
1969.
Okay.
So it was an interest. 1969. And I was not all that politically aware of the world in 1969. I was a little more concerned with just getting through the day and having, getting the stalls mucked out, and in high school, keeping peace at home and just trying to put one foot in front of the other and not have too miserable a day at school. So I was a little self-immersed back in the day. I do remember watching Walter Cronkite on TV and being somewhat aware of what was going on. So I was certainly aware of what was happening in the Kennedy world, because I was a little bit part of that. But it was an interesting thing for me to look back on that and see how history was evolving around me and how I would occasionally contact it. Anyway. Interesting, very interesting stuff. What was I going to say? Anything?
Well, you had gone back to camp for the second year, and now you're in Beaufort?
Brevard, as you say.
Yeah.
I had a wonderful experience there. Actually left when that camp closed for the summer. There was a horse show going on in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, and I somehow got to Blowing Rock, North Carolina, because I had to kind of work my way back up to get back into Rhode Island, and I was walking down the street in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, kind of just maybe looking for the horse show was going on, and I thought maybe I could get a ride on a van or something back up to New England. Maybe there'd be somebody there from New England who was down at this Blowing Rock horse show, big horse show. And I was standing in a doorway in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, and this other guy with long hair came by, because I kind of had long hair in those days. I had hair in those days. And it was like, oh my God, another person with long hair. And he said, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And he was working at a place called the Farmhouse in Blowing Rock, North Carolina. And he asked me if I wanted to, they were looking for people to work in the kitchen. And I said, yeah, what the heck? Free room and board, work all day. So ended up working as a waiter. Started in the kitchen in Blowing Rock, North Carolina. And I always liked to sing. So they had singing waiters and waitresses at the Farmhouse in North Carolina. If you Google the Farmhouse, Blowing Rock, you can see some of the old stuff. And most of the people I just got up a couple times during the evening when things were slow in the kitchen and would sing something that I knew from I was kind of addicted to Frank Sinatra and those old tunes back in the day. And God, what a hoot.
Now, if we link those to the show notes, you're singing the singing there, would you be performing in any of those? Okay.
No, I don't think there's no. God, I hope not. I wasn't that good. I think I was a filler for other stuff. No, it was fun. It was great fun. Anyway.
So that was at the end of the second year.
Yeah.
And you're on your way back to college.
Went back to college. During the school year, I was that's when I think I started waiting on tables in Newport, because that was really good money back in those days. Newport, America's Cup. Waited on tables and made lots of money, or more money than I could imagine as a whatever I was, but 19 or 20-year-old, and lived one summer in Newport with a bunch of friends down on the point. And then the next summer did the same thing, waited on tables and continued to wait on tables all year long. Next summer rented a room in a fraternity house at URI. And I think that summer I worked at a restaurant in Galilee called George's Restaurant, which I think is still there. I just remember eating a lot of fried food and having what I thought was an ulcer at the time. Anyway, got some of the other my fraternity brothers jobs at George's in Galilee, and had a fabulous summer. And at the end of that summer, before my senior year, they gave me a bid to become a member of the fraternity. Accepted it because they were a great bunch of guys, and I just wanted to be part of that group. I was an RA in a dormitory because it was, money. So I didn't have to live in the house, just wanted me to become a brother. And the Clay Sink, the fraternity, the faculty advisor for the fraternity, knew how well I had done academically. He nominated me for a scholarship for this fraternity. And I got a scholarship for veterinary school that paid a big chunk of Michigan State University.
And he nominated you. You didn't seek it. He nominated
No,
you.
and it was a big surprise, total shock. It was, anyway, I don't know why I just remember that. I haven't thought of that in years.
Wow.
But it helped pay for vet school. It helped pay for vet school, which took a lot of the burden. And back in those days, vet school was much more affordable. So I was able to graduate from vet school without a lot of debt. I think I paid $50 a month for a long time. So it gave me the freedom to kind of do as an adult what I wanted to do, unlike the kind of debt that kids are faced with nowadays, which is just, incredible.
And what were the things that you wanted to do that you were able to do that others might not have been able to do?
As a veterinarian, well, it allowed me to, I practiced for a couple of years, really struggled with charging people, for things that we did. So, I was very difficult for me to charge people, especially the horse people and dairy people. They just could not, it just was.
Didn't have the means? Or
a lot of them did, because I worked in a very wealthy community, but a lot of people didn't, and it was a struggle for me to stay in clinical practice. And I think having no debt, to answer your question, I think that what the question was, having no debt really allowed me the opportunity to do a residency, which didn't pay a lot of money, and do it comfortably and live within my means, which were always pretty frugal. So not having debt back in those days gave me a lot more freedom than kids have today. And that's, and that taught me that when I advise students in my career as an academician and a program director, when you're advising students on, and teaching them, trying to get them to understand that there are lots of different opportunities out there, and just trying to get them to understand what debt's going to be like, and what the burden of debt is going to be like, and how it, depending on that burden, how much that can dictate what you do later on. I mean, you want to, in the medical world, in the human medical world, if you want to be a primary care provider or a pediatrician, which don't pay a lot of money in human medicine, either as a PA or as a physician, you may not be able to do that if you've got a couple $100,000 in debt. You may have to go and do cardiothoracic surgery or something, which is not what you want to do. But in order to pay for your family and stuff, you may have to do that. So. But, kids want to follow their heart and follow their passion, and they don't know what they don't know until they know it, or something like that.
Yeah. So you were actually practicing in the veterinary, your own practice for a couple of years, and then you went off. Did you then enter into research?
The first year I was looking for a residency position, and I really liked physiology. So I took a job at the University of Minnesota, teaching biochemistry and taking physiology classes, advanced physiology. And little did I know, stupid me, that most of physiology is governed by principles of physics. Blood flow is all Bernoulli's principle. Bernoulli's principle when the stroke dynamics in the pool. Anyway, it's flow. Flow of water, flow of blood, flow of air. And I had always, if I'd struggled with anything ever in my life academically, it was physics. And I discovered when I was a physiology resident at the University of Minnesota, I found myself going to the pathology rounds because they were much more interesting. It was kidneys that you'd examine and see pathology. It was much more visual, three-dimensional. You could see it, feel it, cut it into small sections, stain it, look at it under a microscope. You could see it and touch it. And that's what I was drawn to that. And that's when I changed over to pathology and did the University of Chicago thing. And Chicago, I had fallen in love with somebody who lived in Chicago on a ski trip to Vail, Colorado. And so I ended up in Chicago because of that.
Nice.
But anyway, long time ago, water under the bridge.
I'm going to sidetrack a little bit here because there's a note that in your bio, San Diego Zoo.
Yeah. The chairman of the department at Cornell, even though it was a department that taught by intimidation, the chairman was looking for the chairman of the pathology department at Cornell had the ability to appoint a resident in pathology every year at the San Diego Zoo. Somehow they had developed that relationship. And of all the residents during the second year of my residency at Cornell, he asked me if I'd be interested in going out and doing that residency. He knew I was a little. He knew. I think he knew that I needed a little bit more seasoning before I was thrown into board certification for pathology and all that. The relationship that I had moved to Chicago for dissolved, and I was still struggling in the aftermath of that, honestly. And I think he recognized that I still needed to get my feet on the ground. So he said, I think you'd be a good candidate for that San Diego position. And I said, I'll take it. And it was a very interesting year in San Diego.
It was a year you spent there?
A year in San Diego. That's where I got into triathlons. I had my dog, Squirtman, and we just all got in the car and drove to San Diego and did it. I struggled with the zoo. I had never really spent that much time around a zoo. Struggled with caged animals, even though it was a stellar world-class zoo with very few cages, large open areas where the animals were able to roam, as much as they could in a city zoo. But I did struggle with that. But it was a good year. It was a good year. And I was all set to come back and to sit for my boards. The American College of Veterinary Pathology gave certification exams, and my grandmother got sick. And this is an interesting thing back. Hadn't really, I'd gone home for Christmas and, still participated in the home life. Didn't really, and my grandmother was I love my grandmother so much. My grandfather had already died. And it was my two parents at this point and my grandmother. And my grandmother, they needed help taking care of my grandmother. So I just went back to Newport, moved back into the house with my mother and father.
The same house?
The same house, to take care of my grandmother. And I saw my father in a very different light. And he'd stopped drinking. And I just saw a very kind, sweet, gentle man, with nothing but love in his heart, as he would take care of my grandmother, who at that point could not do anything for herself. She couldn't use her hands or feet. She was in a wheelchair. And to see how he would take care of her, and then me helping him take care of her and helping my mother take care of her, made me start to look back on what his life must have been like I talked about before, struggling with two kids in your 20s. And we were able to reconcile and pull ourselves back together and do okay, and do quite well, actually, for a number of years till he died at 79 or something like that. So it's interesting how things can turn around if you are open to that possibility and if you give them a chance, and if you just shut up and listen and reflect. And it's kind of one of the stories that I teach my students when we talk about empathy and compassion, because I think that was a big learning point, turning point for me in my life, when I really started to understand who he was and why he became who he became, and the stresses that caused that. It was good. It was healing. I think it was healing for both of us.
Yeah, I think about that, and most people would have just stayed away, not returned, maybe.
Oh, I couldn't do that for my grandmother. No, couldn't do that. No, it was not a choice. It was not a.
At what age were you when you recognized that this woman has my heart,
has my back? I don't think I recognized how crucial she was in saving me for many years. Another reason, yeah, she knew what was going on. She could see it. She did not,
But it did it in her own way.
But did it in her own way, yeah. And had to dance very quietly around all of the issues in that extended family house. It was not a. It was a house of where nobody talked about anything. Which is another reason I'm drawn to the Midcoast Youth Center. This is sounding like an advertisement for the NYC, for the skate park, but I ended up in the hospital enough times when I was a teenager because of different things, because of the anxiety and stress around being my father. And I actually tried to kill myself when I was, I don't remember, 14 or 15, I think. And the struggles that I had as a kid, when I'd end up in the hospital with something, or when I ended up getting my stomach pumped out as a teenager, pills that I took, nobody ever asked me what was going on at home, or it was all just, I'd get discharged, sent back home, and I'd, just go on my way again. My grandmother was the one, I think, of everybody, who was the one who really recognized that. And we never talked about it. She just knew enough to take me out of that situation. And so that's why I like the Midcoast. When I heard about what the skate park did for kids, it provides an opportunity for kids to be heard, and or to at least be given the opportunity to talk about what's going on in your life that maybe you could need some help with. You might need some help with. Because I'm not saying poor George, but that opportunity never came up for me as a kid, and I just wonder how it would have changed my life. Not that I had a bad life; I liked my life, but how it would have changed me as a person if I'd been able to metabolize that as a teenager, understand it more, reflect on it more, figure it out more. Because I didn't figure all that stuff out until much later in life. So I'm just saying that the skate parks and Jamie Dorr and Doran Wright's passion for what they do at the youth center saves lives. And if it doesn't save lives, it improves lives. I can't help but think that something like that would have changed me somehow. So I didn't have the struggles that I did have as I aged and grew up. Not that I struggled. I mean, I did okay. I'm very happy. But kids these days are challenged by so much that they deserve a chance to try to figure that stuff out when they're young, to set them up for success as they get older. The world has just got so many challenges in it without that. family mental health stuff. To be able to figure that out, and when you're younger, I think is the right thing to try to support and try to get to try to accomplish.
Makes me think about, and I don't know who this comes from, Benjamin, you may remember, I know you've talked about it before, and George, you might, where they discuss, today we have the knowledge of all history, and so we can advance so quickly because of that. I mean, in the beginning, the first person that invented the wheel, how long did it take him to figure that out?
Yeah.
And we're so far beyond that, and we can go back to the texts of others. The example that I heard just the other day was, could the one-time champ of chess beat the existing champ of chess? And he said, no, I couldn't. And he said, because my mental quickness isn't as sharp as it was, and also because this other individual had all the other champs to learn from, and to learn from that champ who said, I can't beat him anymore because he knows all my tricks.
Yeah.
So how does that play out, do you think, at the Midcoast Youth Center with people like yourself who go back with an effort like Jamie and Doran, who've had experiences to try to help make these kids' lives better?
I hope so. I can't help but think, yes, I can't help but think that it's and I'm just starting to get it more involved there. So I don't know what I don't know about what goes on there, but I've seen stuff, and I've got at your fundraiser the other night. I met a couple of the graduates of that program, and it's, I think I think that those kinds of things can be accomplished. I mean, why? God, I was just listening to a NPR show today at 10 o'clock, I think it was, on workism and the addiction to work. And it's a fascinating hour of radio if you're looking for something to listen to. But there was somebody on there talking about, we as individuals, because I did become a workaholic because I knew that hard work would be rewarded. And so I did it for 70 years. I still do it. But there was a line that the guy said, or somebody said, he said, we write the book ourselves that we need to read at the end, and I'm like, oh boy, ain't that the truth? And I was thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful if at 72 or some age, 75, you could relive your life backwards, knowing what you know now, and do all the same things, but if you could somehow go back, having read the book that you wrote at 75, and go back and live it backwards, wouldn't that be interesting? Instead of coming back in the next life with whatever it is you come back with, because I do believe in that we do that. But anyway. Yeah, it's interesting looking at things from 72. And yeah.
So your life today, what's it look like?
It's very nice. Lucky, worked hard. And I'm able to spend time doing some board work and getting more involved in the youth center. There's a movement in the veterinary medical world which is, if anybody in the listening audience has tried to bring a dog or cat or horse or to see a veterinarian in the recent past, they'll see how challenging it is because veterinarians are so incredibly busy. And there are only 30 vet schools or something in the United States and Canada, a couple of here, and so the number of veterinarians in this country is woefully inadequate to take care of the number of animals that are in need of care, large or small, in rescue facilities or in private homes or on farms. There's just a lot of need. And it's very similar to the 60s, when it was recognized that the human medical field was struggling with the number of physicians and healthcare providers. And people recognized the need for a new provider, a new paradigm. And long story short, that's how the PA profession was created. 67 paramedics coming out of Vietnam were trained to provide primary care. First group of PAs graduated from Duke in 1967. They were all paramedics. So why couldn't we do that now with training people to be PAs in the veterinary world, or what a group of about 30 of us in the country have pulled together to call the Veterinary Professional Associate, the VPA. So I'm part of the group that, and this gives me goosebumps because it's very exciting. I'm part of the group that's creating this paradigm for the veterinary world, not without opposition from interesting places, but so I'm also very involved in that. Anyway,
I hear
need to get a plug in for that.
I hear the innovator across the table from me right there.
Ooh, nice. Good job.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to ask this question.
Yes.
A man who has worked hard and has understood from a very young age the value, intrinsic value that you get from working hard.
Yeah.
You're in the innovator stage in your life, more innovator than, I guess you're semi-retired, we'll say.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you shift that so that you're not constantly looking for that work gratification?
Yeah. Good point. I don't know. It's a challenge. I was actually offered something very interesting on Monday in the world of academia. And it's still a struggle to say no. But I think I found the places where I want to spend my time. I think working with the people at the skate park, Mid-Coast Youth Center. I think the leadership, the new leadership at the YMCA, the Bath Area YMCA, is phenomenal, and some wonderful things going on there in food insecurity, childcare, geriatric, older adult health and wellness, and then this VPA thing, this Veterinary Professional Associate thing. I think those are all in the wheelhouse that I need to. That's where I want to devote my time. And I am. Yeah, and balance. Yeah, I never was good at balance, which is why I'm single. I got to say, that's another hour. It's another hour, but the challenges of working hard have impacted that anyway.
Well, it served you very well. And I would say, I hear this all the time. I hear it. I read it, I hear it, and I hear it in my head a lot that, saying yes to something means you're saying no to something else.
Yeah.
And that other no may be what you really want to do. That is the challenge for me, I know.
And a wise friend of mine, when I was maybe 10 years ago, he laid out a tape measure on a table for me. And he said, okay, if your life expectancy is whatever it was at the time, it's less 86 inches, and you're at 65, it gives you a different perspective on those last 10 years or so, and what you should say no to if you read your book that you wrote. Sometimes you have to read it more than once or twice. To help you parse out and triage what you do in those last years, if you're lucky enough to have your health if you're lucky enough to have your health.
Amen to that.
And yeah.
Mm.
And every day is a blessing if you've got your health.
Absolutely.
Really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great conversation, George. I really appreciate you coming in and sharing with us. And you are a great spark to the community. We're so happy to have you here. And you're doing great works. And you'll continue to do so.
As are you, young man. So thank you to you and your son. Thank you. Thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah. So, George, if people would like to get in touch with you and, learn more maybe about any of the things that you're involved with or something past in your experience, how might they reach you?
LinkedIn.
Great.
I'm on LinkedIn. I look at it occasionally and see who's tried to rattle my cage. It's a nice way to keep up with old friends and things. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you.